Hello everyone, I'm Laura Dormer and I'm the editor of the Evidence Base. I'm pleased to be joined today by Priti and Tijana from Genesis Research Group. At ISPOR 2025, Priti and Tijana explored the topic, is IRA becoming America's HTA? And in this interview, we're going to dive deeper into some of their insights on that topic. So Priti and Tijana, welcome. To begin, could you briefly describe your roles at Genesis Research and what led you to explore this topic at ISPOR 2025?
Sure, I can go first. My name is Priti Jhingran. I am the Vice President of Evidence and HEOR Strategy at Genesis Research. I've been here 5 years, but prior to that, I spent almost 2 decades in pharma, in leadership roles in the HEOR space, both globally as well as US. I've had the opportunity to lead multiple initiatives focused on value, evidence, and outcomes. And what led us to explore this topic? Honestly, it was genuinely being curious about how similar or dissimilar the evidence needs were between the IRA as well as the HTA. And as you can imagine, as strategic consultants, we get exposed to these dossiers, both for IRA as well as the HTA. And we saw a lot of similarities, but we also saw some differences as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ignjatovic. I'm the Vice President in the Access and Pricing Division of Genesis Research Group. I've been in the space of market access for over 15 years, and my focus currently is supporting our clients in navigating market access challenges and optimizing opportunities for their asset with a focus on the payer lens in particular. And from the reason why this topic is so interesting and important at this stage is that the IRA passing really is shifting some of the dynamics in the US market from being a free drug pricing market to starting to see some constraints. And I think that is a significant development that is quite important for our partners.
Priti, could you outline the key evidence requirements under the IRA's Medicare drug price negotiation program?
Sure, happy to. There are about 5 different categories of evidence requirements for the IRA. One is clinical benefit. How does the drug's efficacy and safety pan out in the clinical trials? Second is comparative effectiveness. So in this instance, you're comparing the efficacy and safety of the drug relative to alternative options. Third is the cost effectiveness or the economics associated with the drug use. Again, it's a relative assessment of the economics. Fourth is the market data, which is where insights into pricing, sales, and utilization patterns are taken into consideration. And the last one is the use of real-world evidence, especially knowing that the IRA assessment happens many years after launch. So you have the data to evaluate the performance of the product in routine clinical practice.
And in your view, which elements of the IRA negotiation process most closely resemble traditional HTA frameworks, and conversely, where do they diverge?
Sure, it's a really good question and a crux of our presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, the IRA as well as the HTA include net clinical benefit, which is again safety and efficacy, comparative effectiveness, real world effectiveness, although there are some differences between how real world effectiveness is evaluated in HTA and IRA, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. Both include insights and inputs from patients and providers, and both include some element of cost effectiveness or economic analysis. However, there are some differences as well. When it comes to being dissimilar, as I mentioned, cost effectiveness is included in IRA, as well as HTA. However, the IRA does not include any assessment of quality adjusted life year threshold. That is essentially barred from inclusion within IRA. From an RWE perspective, there's more emphasis on RWE in the IRA negotiations, primarily because the product has already been in the market for many years. So again, like I said earlier, there is more data available on the performance in clinical practice. IRA does not include any budgetary impact assessment, whereas HTAs do. IRA does not have any comparison to an external reference price. HTAs certainly include that in their assessment. And lastly, as a part of the dossiers which are presented by the manufacturers, CMS also requests manufacturers to provide the cost of manufacturing and cost of research and development to and have it be part of the negotiations. I did remember one additional thing. What CMS does is that they actually weight all indications of a specific molecule equally, which is again different between the IRA and the HTA.
One of the notable distinctions you mentioned there was the exclusion of QALYs in IRA negotiations. So how does that influence the nature and the quality of the evidence that manufacturers are expected to submit?
The use of QALYs is actually not permitted by the IRA, and that's primarily to safeguard recommendations, which the CMS makes that could be discriminatory in nature. However, CMS essentially is flexible and has left the door open to considering evidence from cost effectiveness studies. So essentially, they can include everything which is part of a cost effectiveness analysis, but they will not use a QALY assessment in their evaluation.
Tijana, your analysis suggests that the IRA may shorten the free pricing window by approximately 2 years. What are the implications of this for early pricing and market access strategies, particularly for small molecule therapies?
So before I dive into the difference between the small molecules and biologics, I just want to take a step back and remind us that one of the unique aspects of the IRA process and the drug price negotiation process is that products are only selected a number of years after they've been on the market, and that applicable negotiated price only comes into effect further down the line. So what we have done in our analysis to illustrate to what degree the free drug price period may be shortened is we've compared the expected loss of exclusivity for the selected products for the first 2 rounds of negotiations and looked at how the first applicable date of the negotiated price compares versus the LOE. And we found that on average, we're looking at about 2 years shortening of the free price period. Now, what is worth pointing out is that we have a difference between how small molecules are treated versus biologics, in that the law provisions allow the small molecules to become eligible for selection for the negotiation process 4 years ahead of their biologic counterparts. And that really puts them at the disadvantage in terms of thinking what the overall revenue potential is for a product. It's not the first time we have seen that the biologics and the small molecules get treated differently. We have the exclusivity provisions already different. But I think this one really reinforces the disadvantage that the small molecules have and potential for the manufacturers to really weigh in their portfolio. And when having a choice between pursuing a small molecule versus the biologics, to really go for the biologics due to that higher revenue potential from the IRA perspective. We've seen some legislative moves trying to eliminate that difference and really put the small molecules and biologics on level playing field, APIC Act being the most visible, and it has made some progress through the legislative system. However, it hasn't been passed yet, so it's something to watch out for to see how things pan out in the future.
The requirement to apply single maximum fair price across all indications presents challenges for multi-indication and combination products. How can manufacturers strategically address this when considering label expansions?
So that is another specificity of the IRA process, actually. On one hand, we have the evaluation of a product value and the resulting price negotiation dependent on its value in all of the approved indications. And at the same time, a product is more likely, in a way, to be selected for the negotiation the more indications it has, or more precisely, the higher budget impact for the Medicare program altogether. So what that really means that the manufacturers are now having to weigh up the pros and cons and the trade-offs between having an indication expansion for their assets and therefore maximizing the revenue versus increased risk of being selected for the negotiation and then all the ensuing evidence generation requirements, negotiation, potential price drop they may have to experience in their life cycle. So we have already been involved in some of the decisions where our clients have decided to deprioritize or push down the timing of life cycle expansion, indication expansion for their assets based on this fine balance between the volume and the net price.
And reflecting now on the first round of negotiations, which types of evidence appeared most influential in determining outcomes and what elements had perhaps less impact than expected?
That's really an interesting question and actually a quite tricky one to address. So what we have done in analysis, we've looked at the first round of negotiations, those documents and the outputs. And we only have one round of negotiations to go on, and this is an opinion and experience will be evolving over time. But what we can see both based on those documents as well as our involvement in the conversations and just the experience in the field in general, that what's really coming up at the top is having robust comparative data versus CMS choice of therapeutic alternative. This is the type of evidence and arguments that CMS is prioritizing. Now, one thing that's worth highlighting here is that that choice of therapeutic alternative for CMS is not, it can sometimes be a challenge. It's not always straightforward because their ideal choice may not be aligning with what the manufacturer has anticipated. But what is critical is first and foremost, where possible, having head-to-head data as the highest level of evidence. And then next to that, CMS is taking into account indirect treatment comparisons, network meta-analysis, and in addition to that, real-world evidence, because having that assessment post-launch, there is an opportunity to generate it. There's no strict hard and fast hierarchy in terms of most important. However, that comparative evidence is coming up at the top. Having a really strong cross-indication dossiers, cost offsets, and also real-world evidence is also supportive of the overall good outcome. On the other hand, if you look at what's resonated less well with CMS, any generic arguments around just the value of innovative mechanism of action, the pure R&D cost investment, or non-quantifiable data. So really to justify a price premium, it's really important to have robust quantifiable outcomes from the CMS perspective.
Looking ahead, what practical advice would you offer to manufacturers and HEOR teams preparing for the next negotiation cycle? Are there specific IRA readiness strategies that you would emphasize?
So I think we can draw lots of parallels from the IRA from some of the established HTA markets and systems. So I would say it's quite important to draw that organizational experience and knowledge because companies are having to manage these processes across the globe and transfer it into the US. There are some differences, as we've discussed, but certainly planning early for cross-indication dossiers and building that evidence generation plan beyond launch is going to become critical. So really treating IRA readiness like HTA readiness and drawing on all the organizational experience to make that a success.
Priti, coming to you, how do you see the role of RWE evolving in future IRA negotiations, especially given the emphasis on post-launch evidence?
So I want to build on what Tijana said. So since the IRA negotiations happened many years after launch, developing that comparative evidence and a repository of evidence which establishes the real world value of the product becomes extremely important. One aspect of commercialization of product is to get access at the time of launch, but the other element is to sustain access. And in comparative markets where you have alternative options, building robust comparative data, also generating real world evidence in Medicare data sources becomes extremely important. That does require us to work very closely with our cross-functional matrix partners in pharma and to appropriate funds for the right studies, which will continue to optimize the value of the asset.
Thank you. Wonderful. So thank you both for speaking to us today on this topic. With that, I'd like to close by thanking our viewers for joining us on the evidence space, and thanking you both again for speaking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.